want to talk. My guest this week is a veteran named Jesse Gould, who I don't know a lot about, but trust me, I know enough about him that I wanted to speak to him, and I know enough about him that you want to hear what he has to say. Jesse, welcome to my show. And I'm going to learn a lot about Jesse just as you're learning about it, because Jesse is a friend of my wife's, and you may know my sons as well, or just my wife?
No, just your wife. I haven't had the chance to meet your.
You guys
your
met in Costa Rica?
We met in Peru.
So you were. Wait a minute. You were. Okay. So we're gonna see. You go Peru. Okay, Costa Rica. What's going on here? My wife Suzette and my entire family, actually, all my children, have been on a spiritual journey now for quite some time. And it started for my wife when her mom passed a number of years ago. And it was a real shock to the system. And she had a lot of questions. And then a few years later, and you may have heard a lot of these stories probably, her brother was murdered. And a few years after that, another brother committed suicide. So in a very short amount of time, my wife suffered tremendous loss and needed answers, needed to know what was going on out there. And she started on a journey that my children have followed her on. They're grown children. And part of this journey, and it was sort of almost the pinnacle of the journey, was going to Peru to do ayahuasca. And this is where she met you.
Correct.
Don Howard.
Yes.
The ayahuasca master, or ayahuasca. Was he an ayahuasquero or just?
Yeah, he's a shaman.
Yeah, shaman. That's the word. See, I don't know the words. Jesse will tell me the words. And I'm going to skip a lot of parts here, and we may come back to it because it's really about why Jesse's here. And when my wife went there, and you've heard things, Rogan has talked extensively about ayahuasca, and it's a plant, it's a medicine plant. Correct my terminology. I'm the observer in my family. All of my 4 children and my wife are all on the spiritual journey. They've all done ayahuasca. They've done, they've expanded their minds. They've expanded their vision. And I am the one who's plugged into the matrix, financing everything. But I also, I'm very supportive of their journey, but a lot of it has to do with finding the truth about life and the truth about, who we are, where we are, what we are, why we are. And I always say I don't really want to know the truth. I'm really happy with the truth I'm in. I'm a rock star with a hot wife, and I'm rich. So if this is the Matrix, don't fucking unplug me ever. They want to be unplugged. My wife goes, I would not want to live like that. I want to know the truth. Fine. Continue on your journey, my love. See if you're plugged in and find out the truth. But on that journey down to Peru in the deep, and that ayahuasca trip, and Suzette has been on a few now, which are a lot more lightweight.
Have you noticed big changes in her since she did her initial ceremony?
Thankfully, no. No. I mean, I was really afraid she was going to come back with a shaved head and flowing robes.
Right.
And I don't. I want her to find the answers, and I want her to discover her truths. But I don't. I'm deeply in love as we've been together 42 years. So with this woman, and I don't want a different woman to come back. So I was a little fearful, but I mean, certainly I've seen some major changes in her health-wise.
Right.
She's all very healthy, but we work with a nutritionist, and she had some stomach issues, some things, parasites, things like that she was dealing with. And when he did her blood work after her journey, the ayahuasca, he said it was like a different human being. Her blood work had changed just completely, and he was stunned. Like how does that happen? Cody, my son, who you have not met, but he went down to Peru prior, him and my son Shane, before Suzette went down. I don't think I would have been so ready to let her go down there by herself into the deep jungles. This was a trip, man.
Right.
You went down there. I don't think I would have been so ready to let her go if they hadn't been there first and said, Dad, it's the real deal, and it's
powerful, but it's not. You're not going to be she's still going to come back.
Well, it wasn't even that. I was concerned about the security of it.
I get a lot of questions with that too, and that can be an issue nowadays because as it's grown in popularity, there's the economic incentive, obviously, for people to just have like fly-by-night shops, and so you will hear some bad stories, but generally it's the places that are not vetted, or it's just some guy that doesn't know what he's doing. But the places that are like secure, like the place that we met with Don Howard, Spirit Quest in Peru, he's been doing it for
a while. That was key. And there are some places, and we're going to get to the reason why this vet was on this journey, because his reasons were different, his experience is different, and yet there's a commonality. When you get there, everybody is looking for some answers,
right?
And hearing that ayahuasca is miraculous. My son Cody suffered ADHD his whole life. He's a writer-director, and he struggled with ADHD all through school, and he has just tried everything over the years he was medicated, and that became addictive, so he had to get off the drugs. That was a problem. And then he's tried so many different ways to combat it, and it's always been a battle for him. And he's getting ready to film. He's got a 3-picture deal at Warner's now. Don't cry for Cody. But at the same time, it's something he's had to struggle with. Came back from doing ayahuasca in Peru, and his ADHD was gone. Gone. He doesn't have ADHD anymore. It reprogrammed his brain. He had a brain mapping done before he went down and after, and he had a lot of dead spots from sports accidents. You get from head injuries.
Yeah, traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, skateboarding, snowboarding, football. He had traumatic, and your brain works around these spots, but he had dead spots. Were gone. The brain mapping reflected that they had been electronic, whatever's connecting there, had been reconnected, and his ADHD was cured. So this is from a medicinal plant, okay? And you hear stories about people with cancer and I've heard this. So it's almost, I use the word crazy, but a lot of these stories are verified. People have just been cured of so many physical and mental ailments, which brings me to your journey. What brought you to try ayahuasca, to meet my wife in Peru, in the jungles of Peru?
So I was a Army Ranger for about 4.5 years. I went and I was deployed 3 times to Afghanistan. I didn't have any of the sort of traditional or like what you see in the movies, PTSD kind of like symptoms. Fortunately, I didn't experience that, negative story.
You're going to find me interjecting a lot. Don't worry, I'll always pull you back to your story.
Yeah.
But is PTSD a word that's bandied about too loosely?
It is.
Or too quickly sometimes?
But that's kind of the problem with psychology as well, is that we don't fully understand these causes. So PTSD is a very broad spectrum diagnosis, and it can be from all sorts of stuff. It can be from trauma that you've seen. It can be, even from head injury. And that's what they're discovering now, is a lot of these symptoms that have previously been diagnoses with like psychology is actually because of traumatic brain injury. So my own experience, I was a mortar with the Rangers, and I was just around a lot of concussive force, just because you're shooting off mortars and you're around a lot of explosions and breaches and all that other kind of stuff. And so when I got out, I was still fully functional, and on the outside you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, but there was something I was like missing, or like something that was holding me back. And that's with your question, that's the problem with a lot of veterans, is that they don't want to say that they have PTSD. They know something's off, but they don't want to be like, the Hollywood like.
Well, that's
crazy.
interesting what you said. I hate to compare. The word autism is used, and it covers a broad spectrum of mental conditions.
Right.
PTSD, by your description, sounds like it also covers a broad spectrum of mental issues.
Right.
Like it pops on my mind because of that fucking asshole who just shot up the club here in California. We're in California right now, and they immediately, said, "Oh, it started PTSD started being bandied about because he was a veteran and had served." And do you think that's too quickly jumped on as a cause, or is it reasoning?
I mean, it's probably true, but
how many guys with PTSD are shooting the place up?
Exactly. Like he also has to have like other things wrong with him to get to that point. Just because you have generally like PTSD, and what I was saying is a lot of veterans come out and they're just like myself, just are almost like being dragged, like have like a weight, and there's just something you can't overcome. It's not like what you'd see in the movies, or unfortunately with this guy, where all of a sudden you become this like crazy person and you're like threatening your wife at night. Like that's
Right.
a very minute, small amount of cases, and that gets overplayed, and so then that stigmatizes other people from getting help because they don't want to be associated with that. Nobody wants to be like the veteran associated with this asshole
right, and that one particularly, and I thought was awful because it is beyond the exception, not the rule. Yet if that people start referring, he had PTSD, it reflects very badly on other people suffering who are not violent dangerous to anybody, except more times than not themselves.
Right.
I mean, that's that's really a lot. What is it? The number's 22.
Yeah.
Is the number people talk about suicides, veteran suicides.
Yeah, it's definitely, the veteran community is definitely in a crisis in terms of suicide. There's a much higher rate among the veteran community of suicide, addiction, PTSD, depression, all these sort of things. And the current system, the Veteran Affairs, has shown itself to be unable to handle this.